waters of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis Stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Renato was sure he could master it. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. There had to be some way to use the Iblis Stone. It was old, wasn't it? People were so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than he wanted to be. That had gone rather well, actually.
at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Renato hated cannon traps. Also, who reloaded these things anyway? He never figured that part out.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give me blood. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once.
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "What's the core?" said the stone anxiously.
But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
Why was he listening to a talking rock?
But the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself.
To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes. Especially when they've become enemies.
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods, before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feed the souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls. Its thirst for blood. All right, I get it. This was going to be interesting. The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Renato. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him.
He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? He didn't even need to see the gobblers this time. He could smell seared flesh. And like every other predator, they only eat their meat cooked, preferably alive. Zenobia was waiting for Renato. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled.
She spotted the stone and bolted without another word.
Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. "Kill her," whispered the stone. "You cannot win your rebellion without it. Please." "No," said Zenobia. "Not that way." Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? Renato hesitated. Zenobia was his greatest enemy. She was the Emperor's daughter and his greatest general, and the single person Renato least wanted to remove from this world, especially that way. She was holding her arms out before her, hands fluttering, fending him off with hopeless urgency. Nope, she was weaving a spell. He couldn't move. "This thing is evil," she said. She slid the Iblis stone out of its slot in his gauntlet and slipped it into a bag. "Maybe we can learn from it." She eyed him with a strange, wry, apologetic look, too. And before he could move again, she was gone. Learn from the Iblis stone? What did that mean? Would she take it to the palace or to the observatory on the Nexus? If she thought it was evil, she wouldn't want it in the palace. And, after all, it was evil, wasn't it? Maybe I can outrace her to the observatory, thought Renato. Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. Renato felt a little sick. Ever since Zenobia had taken the stone from him, he'd felt an ache that wouldn't go away. He missed it. He wanted it back. He needed it back. Why hadn't he killed her when he had the chance? She was the enemy. He hadn't even seen her in 14 years. Why had he hesitated? You were a sucker for an empowered woman. Renato kicked himself. Don't make that mistake again. Zenobia thought the stone was evil. Was it? Well, yes, but he still longed to have it back. He'd felt so good killing ravens with it, and yet he'd felt unclean ever since he'd touched it. She confused him. She'd made him want to be a better fox, and then she'd abandoned him, never telling him she was the Emperor's daughter, never contacting him since. Well, who was she to tell him the stone was evil? If he was a weapons engineer, Renato would make the cannonballs go much faster. Fire randomly, obviously.
scientist toads were pointing arcane instruments at the stone and looking at it through prisms and reflections. "Mine," said Reynardo as he took back the stone. "But we need it for science," croaked the toads. So he killed them. He felt better immediately. Smarter, too. "I thought you'd never come for me," whispered the stone. Then, a far-speaker toad croaked in something like Zenobia's voice.
"Reynardo, leave the stone with the toads. It will swallow your soul. You'll kill everyone you love."
That did seem vaguely familiar, but Reynardo had an army to lead, an empire to bring down.
"I know you can fight this thing."
Zenobia continued in the far speaker's croak.
"You let me live. You know how evil it is. It will destroy you, Reynardo. It will destroy everything you love."
He had tried to convince himself that this time he would control the Iblis stone. But he could feel his will becoming brittle. She was right. He would get rid of it. Right? Now. Or now. He didn't really want to. I know. I'll go to the mountains, Reynardo thought. I'll find the strength to do it in the peace and quiet there. As the Farfarer landed at the foot of the mountains, Reynardo was surprised to find Lapino there. "What are you doing here?"
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. I was stowed away on an Imperial courier ship, dressed up as a combat nurse carrying a general's beak transplant.
"It's not a great time," said Reynardo, who was pretty sure he did not, in fact, believe Lapino's story.
That's when you need your friends,
said Lapino. "I just need some peace and quiet," said Reynardo, and grimly set out on the path.
to Earth.
Reynardo told the corpses. It was something he'd seen in a play once.
Within your aerobics crate. Am I right?
Reynardo told his friend how he had slaughtered the toads and how he had nearly slain Zenobia.
A terrible burden, this Iblis stone.
Sympathized the rabbit. Yeah, but I need it. For the rebellion.
Do you now? You know, you were a pretty fine fighter before you were wielding a demonic decoration.
Oddly, the sword wasn't whispering at him to kill Lapino. Up ahead in the mountains, there was a peaceful spot. If he could rid himself of his burden anywhere, it was there. we do it? Said Renato to himself. Renato thought it would make a difference, snatching the Iblastone before the Emperor could get it. And it would destroy him. Zenobia and Lupino, they were both trying to save him. Peace. That was what he needed. So much for peace and quiet. There was Lupino. Again.
You're stronger than some dumb rock,
Lupino said.
Let's just bury it, and no one will ever find it again.
Renato could feel the spirit energy of all those dead ravens inside him, pecking away. The rabbit was right. Even if the rabbit was a traitor, he was still right. He tore the Iblastone from his gauntlet and threw it into the hole Lupino had dug. The stone was silent, probably sulking.
Now whoop those Imperials, said Lupino.
Are you coming?
Ah, no, I can't come with you. It's my old injury, you know. Recently, it's been acting up terrible. I'd be no use to you at all.
So Renato boarded the Farfarer alone. Renato felt lonely on board the Farfarer. How could his old friend Lupino, miraculously escaped from the Empire, leave him to face the final battle alone? Well, he'd abandoned Lupino before, hadn't he? It was only fair. And of course he felt lonely. He'd given up the Iblastone and all the souls he fed it. Of course he felt alone. But he had done the right thing. It had been hard to do, but there was no better feeling than that. Zenobia would be so proud of him. The battle, alas, was not going well. He no longer had the stone, and he'd never gotten the core. Lupino wasn't with him, and he was up against Zenobia, out there somewhere, maneuvering the Emperor's forces. The rebels had been outnumbered from the start, and he still had that aching longing for the stone. But that is what it means to be a hero. He would fight his way to Zenobia. He would show her what he was capable of. Just him, with no diabolic accoutrements. He would win, no matter the odds. Yes, that was it. Pirouette, slash, parry, dodge. Renato had never done such good work in a fight. He wished the poets were along to sing of his exploits for his old age. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill Zenobia. Maybe he could defeat her and take her prisoner. Then he could turn the tide against the Emperor. If she wasn't crowned princess, once this was all over, she'd have more time for him, right?
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time.
By some miracle, Renato fought his way to the Emperor's ship. He was exhausted, bleeding, but he'd found the strength to reject the stone. Zenobia came out of the ship. "Renato!" she shouted, and then she fell down and died. Lapino was behind her, wielding a sword that seemed to suck all the light out of the sun. "You idiot! You threw the stone away!" cried Lapino. "You said it was evil." "It hates sanctimonious prigs like you," laughed Lapino. "We're having a grand old time." Renato turned and ran. But no matter where he ran, Lapino jumped in front of him until Renato was cornered. That boy could hop. "You wouldn't do this to an old friend, would you?" cried Renato. "You mean this?" said Lapino as he slid the sword into Renato's guts. "Damn it! Again?" "Oh, again?" But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renato wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe.
Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Renato could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it.
As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it.
Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
See? With enough leverage, you could go anywhere.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands and thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
That had been his mistake before. Not trusting Zenobia's feelings for him. But how could he have known? After all these years of silence? There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? These things could really use a hand. Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyriver, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by Farspeaker Toad and filled His Majesty in.
But why didn't he get the core?
Croaked the Farspeaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Renato grinned. He doesn't even know why, frowned Zenobia.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
What are you doing?
Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He asked her. She shook her head. He told her. His Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him an eater of souls. an immortal. But to seal his bargain with them, he needed a sacrifice. Someone who truly loved him. She was stunned. Furious. You're lying. Under a truce spell? It's a trick. You can't prove that. Take me to the observatory, and I will. What kind of proof could you possibly have? She said as they landed on the Nexus. Your father ritually sacrificed a village. And he left witnesses? The scientists resurrected one. Well, it's not really alive, but it can talk. A true witness. She frowned. The dead can't lie. Well, I bet they could. They just don't have any reason to. She nodded grimly. You go on ahead. I don't want the Ravens to see me. Caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my father wanted to invoke the Lost Gods? Would he tell you? No. Would you help him? No. I'd burn his books. Why'd he adopt a stray cat? You don't ask a thing like that. No. Not when there's no good answer, she said, her whiskers twitching.
With all the secrets he revealed to the Emperor, the Ravens were probably heading for the secret base. Renata began to wonder if there would be anyone left to save if Zenobia changed sides. Magical energy balls, immune to the laws of gravity.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were scientists, not rebels, Zenobia said, upset. Why would he do this? I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Renato was torn. He wanted Zenobia to see the truth of her father. But she could get the truth out of her father faster without him tagging along. Meanwhile, the fleet would soon be knocking on the door of the secret rebel base. Renato had better be there when they did.
So he had given the Sky Ripper's core to the Empire. He felt stupid about that.
He hoped the Emperor didn't bring the Sky Ripper against the base. There was nothing he could do to fight a legendary weapon. Renato hated when he screwed up. One of these days, he would learn to look before he pounced. But today is not that day. He intoned for his own amusement.
Renato wondered how much Hypatia had known about the book she protected. Enough to tell her son to protect it. Enough to tell Renato to protect her son. He'd let her down there. Renato decided not to tell the Council he'd given the Empire Sky Ripper's core and the location of the secret base. They needed him in battle, not in the brig, right? The Raven was slumped in a pile of its own feathers, like a tree in November.
You can't stop us. The Emperor has a weapon no warrior can defend against.
What happened to you? Renato asked. But the Raven chose that moment to go to the great nest in the sky.
So they'd made the cord into a weapon. That wasn't good.
Well, the eyes have had it. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. But there were still so many games to play, Renato thought as he died.
Renato had never slain so many ravens. The secret base was going to stink of burnt feathers for months. The council speaker was confused.
Our spies say Zenobia has gone berserk. She attacked and destroyed an entire squadron of dropships.
This was amazing good news. He'd shown her the Emperor's evil. Now she'd gone over to the rebel side. Now is our moment. Attack! Renato exulted. They could win this thing. Zenobia commanded half the fleet. Who would follow the mad Emperor when they could follow his heir, who was wise and smart and a brilliant sorceress besides? But what about the core and the Iblis Stone? What evil could the Emperor wreak with those?
As he closed in on the Imperial fleet, Renato liked his odds.
Oh, how had he gotten into this mess? He'd never set out to be a hero. When he was a kid, he'd wanted to be a great cat burglar, until his mother had explained about foxes and cats. And then the Emperor had gone mad, and started sacrificing kittens to the lost gods. There were a lot of dead ravens here. Who had slain them? Everywhere. The precision of the wounds. Renato recognized her style.
It appeared that she was single-handedly turning the tides of the battle. Good. That left the Emperor with only the core. Against him, all the rebels, his daughter and her raven. He wished he was fighting alongside her, but they'd meet up soon enough.
Somebody had been watching. Zenobia was cutting down the Emperor's bodyguard like they were mushrooms. The Emperor was frantically readying some arcane instrument, brass and hammered steel wrapped around a glowing, thrumming sphere. Skyripper's core. Zenobia! Renato shouted. But he had no idea what else to say. Revenge! She shouted as she cut the last bodyguard down. A ray lanced out of the sphere. Everything around her burst into flames, but her sword seemed only to absorb it. She walked towards Isengrim III like she was walking against a river. Nothing could stop her. They were going to win. Zenobia stabbed the Emperor dead and flicked the moaning apparatus off. She was laughing hysterically. Or weeping, maybe. They had won. He ran to her. I killed my own father. She wept, and he held her. He told her he loved her. He would pull her back from the brink of madness. But the core thrummed louder and louder. At that moment, Renato understood that the core was going to explode catastrophically. And that this could have been victory. The Emperor and his daughter dead, the fleet destroyed. He'd almost been a hero. A legendary one, maybe. If only he and the rebel fleet hadn't been here. Oh, again? But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino.